Last year, I made a video about 4 murderers who appeared on TV before being caught for their crimes. Since then, quite a few people have given me suggestions for other killers caught on camera. I got enough suggestions to make a sequel to my original video, so here it is. Even more real-life killers appearing on TV shows. Special thanks to Namp, Gmail account, Poetic Justice 2000 and Billy Webster for the suggestions. I didn't know about any of these before you told me about them, so thanks. I'll start with Bullseye, a dart-based quiz show broadcast in the UK in the 80s and 90s. This episode aired in May 1989, and one of these contestants is a serial killer. John William Cooper had already murdered 2 people by this point. 4 years before this recording, he had attempted to burgle Scoveston Manor, owned by Richard Thomas. John Cooper had worked for Richard in the past, and thought he knew his movements. When he broke into the manor, he expected it to be empty, but he was disturbed by Helen Thomas, Richard's sister. Afraid of being recognised, Cooper killed Helen with his shotgun. Then when Richard Thomas came home, he shot him too. After that, he set fire to the house to hide the evidence. This double murder was Cooper's first known kill, but he had a long history of violent robberies and housebreaking. Later in life, he would be diagnosed as a psychopath, but you would never guess that from his cheerful demeanour on the show, especially when his teammate loses and he commiserates him in such a friendly way.
Oh, unlucky.
Boys, the gamble, are they? That is the gamble. I'm sorry, it's a painful thing, this, and it's going to be even more painful for you when I say it. Have a look at what you could have won.
I've read that psychopaths don't really feel compassion for other humans, but they learn to mimic other people's behaviour in order to appear normal. Maybe that's what we're seeing here. John Cooper had a huge gambling addiction. Having previously won a fortune on a spot the ball competition, he gambled it away, then turned to a life of crime to make his money back. He probably saw this quiz show as his chance to get out of debt. Beneath his calm exterior, something changes inside him. After his appearance on Bullseye, his crimes take on a depraved quality. His son saw him regularly going out at night with his shotgun tucked under his jacket. Just 1 month after his TV appearance, John Cooper killed again. This time it was outside and in broad daylight. Husband and wife Peter and Gwenda Dixon were walking along the Pembrokeshire coastline when Cooper stopped them. He was wielding his shotgun, he tied them up, and then he sexually assaulted Gwenda in front of her husband. He took their bank cards and forced them to tell him the PIN code. When he was finished, he shot them both directly in the face at point-blank range. In 1996, he attacked a group of teenagers in a field. Threatening to shoot them with his shotgun, he made them lie down in the grass. He then raped one of the girls and sexually assaulted another. Nobody was killed on that day, but they were extremely traumatized by the events. There was never enough evidence to tie Cooper to these violent crimes, but he was suspected by the police and was a known criminal. In 1998, he was sent to prison and charged with committing over 30 burglaries and robberies in the Pembrokeshire area. He wouldn't be charged with the murders and the sexual assaults until 2011, when forensic technology had advanced enough to link him with the crimes from DNA samples on his clothes. Watching this footage, I wonder if things might have gone differently had he won. Maybe this single dart throw was partly responsible for Peter and Gwenda Dixon's death. When retired nurse Charlotte Nicholas was found stabbed to death at her home, NBC reporters were eager to interview neighbours and friends of hers. As you may have guessed, they ended up interviewing the killer. Deborah Kinsey lived next door to Charlotte. On October 20th, 2015, Kinsey walked into Charlotte's house and stabbed her 70 times with a knife and screwdriver. The attack was so ferocious that forensic examiners found a broken knife blade snapped off inside Charlotte's body. After killing her, Deborah Kinsey stole her jewellery and sold them at a local pawn shop. CCTV footage shows her pawning rings whilst wearing blood-stained clothing. After that, she returned home and rang the police to report that she had found her neighbour dead. Less than 24 hours later, Kinsey gave this interview to reporters.
And I said, Charlotte, and I didn't hear nothing, but I heard the TV going. So I opened her, she always left her door unlocked. So I opened her door and I walked in and called her name. So I walked in the kitchen and there was her body on the floor with a bunch of blood.
Deborah and Charlotte had a volatile relationship. Deborah told police that they were good friends who would drink together regularly, but text messages on Deborah's phone showed that Charlotte had sent multiple messages telling her to leave her alone. Deborah Kinsey had a long criminal record and was known to be violent. Investigators later found out that she had attacked Charlotte on many occasions, punching her or pushing her to the ground. There are many reasons why someone might give a TV interview about a crime that they themselves committed. It may be a way of gloating over having fooled the police and the press, or maybe they think they will appear less suspicious if they are seen giving a tearful speech in front of the television cameras. Whatever her motives, I find it scary that someone can lie so convincingly after committing such a horrific act.
I just wish I'd come sooner. But I called him as soon as I found her in the kitchen, and I couldn't get any response out of her.
This is Ed Edwards, a notorious American serial killer, appearing on a show called To Tell the Truth in 1972.
What was your reaction in your neighborhood when you came out of the reformatory the first time? Were you put down by your fellow citizens, or did they look up to you?
No, when I was released from the reformatory, they looked up to me, and this motivated me to go on to bigger things, because this is why I was out there committing the crime, was for the recognition.
Mm-hmm. And this happens because a lot of people think it's a big shot thing to do, huh?
Yes, this is the more trouble you get into, the bigger you are in their eyes.
He is very candid about his criminal past. By this point in his life, he had already been incarcerated twice, having escaped from jail once and ending up on the FBI's most wanted list. He carried out a string of robberies on gas stations in the Kentucky area. He was obsessed with being famous. He never wore a mask whilst robbing gas stations because he wanted his face to be known. He wrote a book about his crimes once he was released from jail. Then he appeared on TV twice, once on To Tell the Truth and once on a show called What's My Line. I can't find any recordings of the What's My Line episode, but this recording of Tell the Truth gives a good idea of what he was like in person.
Did somebody in prison help you to get straightened out? I mean, or did you do it yourself?
Yes, I met a man who was a guard at the penitentiary, and he's the one that helped me to rehabilitate.
He's charming and friendly, giving the impression of a completely reformed criminal. Even one of the panel guests remarks on how wholesome and all-American he looks.
It's just like the producers of this show to get a young, all-American looking boy like number 3 with a prison record, the most unlikely looking one up there. And that's why I voted for him.
At least 5 murders have been attributed to Ed Edwards, but it is thought that a number of other slayings could have been done by him, but there just wasn't enough evidence to tie him to the crimes. Edwards liked to kill couples. He would commit horrific crimes that made the news. It would feed his ego and his desire for notoriety. He also enjoyed setting people up to take blame for his murders. He would take trophies from his kills and plant them on other people. He must have taken a perverse enjoyment from seeing people sent to jail and even executed for the crimes that he committed. In 1956, Patricia Kalitzka and her boyfriend Lloyd Dwayne Bogle had driven out to Wadsworth Park in Great Falls after buying hamburgers. They were never seen alive again. Lloyd's body was found next to his car. His hands were bound behind his back and he had been shot twice in the back of the head. Patricia's body was found 3 days later. The body had been thrown down an embankment 7 miles from Wadsworth Park. She had been killed in the same execution style. Nobody was ever convicted for the killings, and the case remains unsolved. But many think that Edwards committed this murder. As you'll see, there is a pattern to his behaviour that is very similar to this particular crime. In 1960, a horrific double murder took place on Lover's Lane in Portland, Oregon. Larry Payton and Beverly Allen drove out there and were parked up when they were attacked. Larry was stabbed over 20 times. His body was found in front of the car and he had obviously put up a fight. Beverly's body was not found until a month later when it was dumped alongside a highway. She had been strangled to death. Ed Edwards was arrested for the murders, but he managed to escape from police custody before taking a lie detector test. 2 other men were then accused of the crime and jailed. In 1977, 5 years after his TV appearance, Ed Edwards murdered Billy Lavaco and Judith Straub in Silver Creek Metropolitan Park, Ohio. Both were shot in the back of the head, another execution-style killing. Edwards was never a suspect in this crime either, but years later he confessed that it was him who committed the killings. In 1979, another couple were murdered in Ohio. Mary Leonard and Ricky Beard were last seen alive, leaving a drive-in theatre together in Ricky's car. The car was found abandoned with a bullet hole in the windshield. 6 years later, their bodies were found. Mary had been stabbed in the chest and then shot. Ricky had been executed with multiple gunshots to the back of the head. Once again, Edwards was never tied to the killings for sure, but an anonymous tip-off in 2009 to the police said to look into Ed Edwards as a suspect for Mary and Ricky's death. In 1980, in Wisconsin, Timothy Hack and Kelly Drew vanished after leaving a wedding reception. Weeks later, their bodies were found in the woods. Timothy had been stabbed and Kelly was strangled. Edwards was one of the suspects in this case and was questioned by the police, but there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. It wasn't until 2009 when semen found on Kelly Drew's corpse could be DNA matched to Edwards. Only then would he admit to killing them. His last known killing was of Danny Boy Edwards, a boy who Edwards and his wife adopted and who lived with them for several years. His corpse was found in a shallow grave in 1997, 1 year after he had gone missing. He had been shot in the back of the head. Edwards eventually confessed to this murder too, claiming to have done it for the insurance money. Along with these murders, there are two other interesting theories about Ed Edwards. One is that he could be responsible for the Zodiac killings, the high-profile serial killer who operated in California during the 60s and 70s. Although the connection between Zodiac and Edwards is disputed, the Zodiac killer's taunting of the police and media would match Edwards' desire to be famous. Plus, artist sketches of what the Zodiac killer looked like match Edwards' appearance at the time. The other theory involves the TV show Making a Murderer. Some people suspect Edwards of killing Teresa Halbach, then framing Stephen Avery for the crime. The framing and the method of killing matches Edwards' usual pattern, and one scene in the documentary even seems to show Edwards standing in the background observing proceedings as Avery is put on trial. Perhaps he is there to admire his own handiwork and see another innocent man be jailed. Ed Edwards was known to hang around at the funerals of his victims and the trials of the people accused for his crimes. Maybe appearing on game shows was another way for him to secretly taunt the world and revel in his undiscovered crimes. The last killer on the list is Ward Weaver. Ward was a man who displayed extreme and violent behaviour from a very young age, possibly a result of his abusive upbringing. From the age of 12, he started to beat, rape and abuse the women in his life, starting with a female relative. This abusive behaviour continued throughout his adult life. He eventually married and had children, although the marriage was unhappy and abusive. In 1997, Weaver's 12-year-old daughter befriended two neighbourhood kids, Ashley Pond and Miranda Gaddis. In 2001, Ashley reported that Ward Weaver had tried to rape her, but for some reason the police didn't investigate. Early 2002, Ashley disappeared. A few weeks later, Miranda also vanished. Weaver had murdered both girls. After killing them, he raped their corpses, cut up their bodies and stored them in the freezer. Eventually, he moved Miranda's remains to a box in his shed. He put Ashley's body in a 55-gallon drum and buried it beneath a large slab of concrete in his garden. Police investigating the disappearance suspected Weaver but didn't make their suspicions public. It was only after a private investigator tipped off a local newspaper that the press decided to interview Weaver. A TV interview conducted by K2 is particularly disturbing.
They are hassling my family, my friends. They are saying that I am the #1 suspect.
Weaver gives the impression of a man wrongly accused and harassed by the FBI. He happily leads the reporter around his home. He describes how the missing girls would often sleep over at his house. The language he uses here seems very sinister now that we know what really happened.
You could not walk anywhere in my front room without stepping on a body.
He seems to be secretly mocking the reporter. Bear in mind that there are 2 corpses of murdered children on the property all the time that he is giving this cheerful interview. He even stands in front of the freezer where he hid Miranda's body. Then he takes them outside and stands directly on top of the concrete block where Ashley's corpse is buried. You even see him look down momentarily as he walks over her grave, his facade of innocence breaking for the briefest moment. It seems that for some killers, being involved in the aftermath is part of the experience. They get to see the effects of their crimes on other people, getting a sadistic pleasure from the misery that they caused. Appearing on TV might also be part of this perverse game. Often they will say things that seem completely innocent until we look at them in retrospect. Once we know what kind of crimes they committed, their words take on a different meaning entirely. For example, John Cooper tells the host of Bullseye that he has an unusual hobby, or Ward Weaver talking about his home being full of bodies. It is very possible that they knew they would eventually be caught, and so they made these comments as hints to people to look back on later. Next time there's a high-profile murder and someone seems eager to talk to the cameras, maybe we should listen to their words a bit more carefully. So that's all for today. Once again, I'd like to thank those that gave suggestions for this episode. It's very much appreciated. If you like this video, you can watch the first installment here, or if you're in the mood for something completely different, check out this video instead. Thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.